I never thought my 36th birthday would end with police lights flashing outside my house. You expect a few candles, maybe an off-key song, and some bad jokes from relatives, but not handcuffs, not questions about attempted poisoning. That night didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like the truth finally breaking free, like something that had been simmering for decades had finally boiled over. Started simple enough. Cake. Always the cake. Growing up, cake was never really mine. My little sister Paige always got the first slice. Even on my birthdays, Mom would say, "Be a good big sister, let Paige have it first. You can wait." It was such a small thing, but when you're 6 and your only toy, your only candy, your only sweater keeps being handed away to someone else, the message burns into you. Your needs don't matter as much as hers. Fast forward 30 years, and nothing had changed. I was still the provider, the fixer, the one expected to sacrifice. Paige was the delicate flower, the one who couldn't handle schoolwork, couldn't keep a job, couldn't pay her bills. And every time she failed, I was asked to patch it up. Mom called it helping family. I called it bleeding slowly. By the time I had my own daughter, Zoe, I thought I'd learned boundaries. But the truth is, saying no to my mother felt like treason. Until last year. Until the cruise. The cruise was supposed to be a big family event, a floating photo album of fake smiles and matching t-shirts. Ryan, my husband, and I had already paid for our spots. Zoe was excited about the bunk beds and unlimited ice cream. We were ready. But Paige, she didn't have the money. Of course she didn't. She never did. And just like always, Mom turned to me. "She's had a hard year, Julia. You've always looked out for her. Can't you cover her this time?" But something inside me snapped. I remembered all the sweaters I never got back, the homework I ghost-wrote, the $200 I sent her every month without so much as a thank you. And I finally said it. No. She can pay for herself or stay home. I'm done. You'd think I had stabbed Mom through the heart. Her voice went flat. "Well, that's your decision." But the silence after that wasn't ordinary. It was heavy, sharp, like a storm cloud settling over the family. I didn't realize until later how dangerous that silence was. So when my birthday rolled around a month before the cruise, I should have known something was wrong. But denial is powerful. I wanted to believe we could just share a cake, smile for a picture, and pretend. The cake was pink. Not bright pink, just soft pastel, almost too perfect. My mom brought it out with a smile so wide it hurt to look at. "Vanilla almond," she chirped. "Your favorite." We all sat around the table. Me, Ryan, Zoe, Mom, Dad, and Paige. The overhead lights were dimmed halfway, the kind of forced coziness that makes everyone look guilty. Candles flickered. Phones were out. Mom's was recording, of course. She loved documenting these little moments of togetherness, even when they were hollow. I made my wish, blew out the candles, and sat down. That's when Zoe slipped her small hand into mine under the table. Her fingers were ice cold. She leaned close, her voice barely a breath. "Don't eat the cake." First I thought she was joking. Kids say strange things. But Zoe wasn't like that. She wasn't dramatic, she wasn't silly when it came to serious stuff. And the look on her face, that pale, wide-eyed fear, it wasn't a game. "Zoe," I whispered. She just squeezed my hand tighter. Ryan was already raising his fork when I slapped it out of his hand. The clang was too loud. Everyone looked up. "Oh, sorry," forced a laugh. "Butterfingers." But under my breath I hissed to him, "Don't eat it." Mom's smile wavered. Paige tilted her head like a bird. "Everything all right?" I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and pulled out my phone. My heart was pounding. Zoe couldn't explain at the table, but maybe she could text. Called her. She picked up without a word. "Text me," I whispered. "What did you hear?" Seconds later the message appeared. "Zoe, I heard them in the kitchen. Grandma and Aunt Paige." Me heard what? "Zoe, they said, are you sure the cake will work? And yes, they won't be able to go tomorrow." My stomach dropped. Not because it sounded crazy, but because it didn't. It made too much sense. I stared at that pink cake when I came back out. Mom sat prim, hands folded. Paige smirked faintly. Dad said nothing like always. And suddenly the whole room was too quiet. Too expectant. I pushed my plate away. I'll save mine for later, I said. No one else touched their slice either. Mom muttered about sugar, Paige about keto. Dad shrugged. The tension thickened until it was almost a taste in the air. 17 minutes later the knock came. Firm. Professional. Police. Zoe stood tall as she told them what she heard. My mother sputtered, Paige hissed, Dad shrank. And me. I sat frozen as they bagged the cake like evidence. Because that's what it was. A birthday cake turned confession. But this story doesn't begin with police at the door. It begins decades earlier, with a rabbit I wasn't allowed to keep. With a pattern of sacrifice disguised as love. And it ends not with handcuffs, but with a decision. A final, irreversible no. Because sometimes revenge isn't about what you do to others. It's about what you finally refuse to let them do to you. And that night, as flashing lights bounced off the walls, I realized I was done. Done being their scapegoat. Done being their wallet. Done pretending pink frosting could cover poison. This was my birthday gift to myself. The last one they'd ever give me. In the weeks after the cruise, my life felt strangely quiet. For the first time in years, there were no demands for money, no phone calls dripping with guilt, no unexpected bills shoved into my lap. It should have felt like freedom. And in some ways it did. But freedom is complicated when you've been shackled for so long. I'd grown so used to being the fixer that silence felt suspicious. I kept waiting for the next crisis, the next manipulation. But nothing came. My mother didn't call. Paige didn't show up crying on my doorstep. My father didn't leave voicemails begging me to, please understand. Instead, I found myself scrolling through old text threads. Paige sending me urgent requests for rent money. Mom guilting me about family obligations. Messages where I said yes even when I wanted to scream no. Looking back, I realized something chilling. I'd been trained. Trained to respond, to provide, to sacrifice. And the moment I broke the pattern, they didn't fight for me. They just discarded me. One evening, Zoe sat beside me on the couch, her knees tucked under her chin. Do you miss them? She asked quietly. I stared at the flickering TV screen. Did I? I missed the idea of them. The mother who used to pack my lunches. The sister who once shared secrets with me under the covers. But those weren't the people who tried to sideline me with poison frosting. Those people were gone long before the cake. No, I said finally. I miss who I thought they were. That's different. Zoe nodded like she understood more than her 12 years should allow. I'm glad you didn't eat it, she whispered. Me too, I whispered back. But the story didn't end there. Because secrets like ours don't stay buried. About a month later, I was in the grocery store when a woman stopped me near the produce section. Family friend. She leaned in close, her voice low. I heard about what happened with your birthday. My stomach tightened. I forced a polite smile. People talk. They do, she said softly. But this time I think it's good they are. As I walked away, pushing my cart, I realized what she meant. For years, my mother and Paige had painted me as cold, selfish, ungrateful. Every family gathering, they found a way to twist the narrative. Julia has money but won't share. Julia thinks she's better than us. Julia abandoned her family. And I'd swallowed it, too tired to argue. But now, the truth was out. They'd exposed themselves. And I hadn't lifted a finger beyond sharing the report. For once, I didn't look like the villain. They did. It was a strange kind of justice. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. People were finally seeing what I'd endured. Still, part of me wrestled with guilt. Late at night, I'd wonder, should I have forgiven them? Family is supposed to forgive, isn't it? But then I'd close my eyes and see the cake, the pink frosting hiding something foul. And I'd remember. Forgiveness doesn't mean walking back into the fire. Ryan noticed the change in me first. One night over dinner, he said, You're lighter. Not happy exactly, but unchained. I thought about that word, unchained. He was right. For years, I'd been shackled to a role I never chose. Provider, scapegoat, punching bag. Now I was finally walking away. The true revenge wasn't the Facebook post. It wasn't the whispers on the cruise. It wasn't even cutting off the money. The true revenge was living without them. Weeks turned into months. Holidays came and went. I didn't get a single invitation. At first that stung. But then I realized, I didn't want one. I spent Thanksgiving with Ryan and Zoe, just the three of us, cooking a meal we actually wanted to eat. No tension, no guilt trips, no page-picking fights at the table. Just peace. On Christmas morning, Zoe unwrapped a small gold necklace I'd picked out for her. She gasped, her eyes shining. "It's perfect," she said, throwing her arms around me. I held her close, thinking about how different this felt. How love, real love, doesn't drain you, fills you. The final blow came quietly, in the form of a group text. A cousin messaged several relatives about planning a reunion. My name was included, but Paige's wasn't. Neither was Mom's. I waited, half expecting someone to add them, to insist they were still family. But no one did. And that's when I realized the truth. They'd poisoned more than cake. They'd poisoned their own reputations. Their greed, their manipulation, their cruelty. It finally caught up to them. For the first time, I wasn't the one cast out. They were. One evening, months after it all unraveled, I sat on the porch watching the sunset. Zoe was inside drawing, Ryan was tinkering in the garage. The world felt still. I thought about calling my mother, about hearing her voice again. But then I remembered her words the night of the cake, sharp and accusing. Family doesn't say no. She was wrong. Family says no when love is twisted into control. Family says no when sacrifice becomes slavery. Family says no when loyalty becomes poison. I whispered the words to the fading light. I am done. And I meant it. From that day on, I stopped looking back. I stopped wondering if they'd ever apologize, if they'd ever change. I stopped craving the version of them that only existed in my memories. Chose something better. Chose peace. And maybe that's the best revenge of all. Not screaming, not fighting, not proving them wrong. Just living well, freely, without their shadow hanging over me. Sometimes revenge is silence. Sometimes revenge is walking away. Sometimes revenge is never letting them touch you again. And for me, revenge was finally tasting the sweetness of a life they couldn't ruin. Because in the end they baked the cake. But I was the one who refused to take a bite. The officers carried the cake away like it was a bomb, wrapped carefully in plastic, tucked into a box. My mother hovered behind them, wringing her hands, muttering half-sentences that made no sense. Paige stood stiff, her lips pressed so tight they looked white. My father had sunk back into his chair, small and useless, like a man who'd watched a storm for years and decided umbrellas were pointless. I just stood there, not saying a word. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because the words inside me were too jagged to release. Zoe, though, was steady. She looked at the older officer with her chin lifted. I called, she told him. I heard them. They wanted to make us too sick to go on the cruise. Her voice didn't waver. 12 years old and braver than all of us combined. Mom laughed then, high and brittle. She's a child. She watches too many crime shows. Sensitive imagination. But the younger officer glanced at the pink frosting and said, Standard procedure is testing. Just to be safe. That's when Mom cracked. It wasn't poison, she blurted. Too loud, too desperate. Silence swallowed the room. Even Paige snapped her head toward her in disbelief. The officer didn't flinch. Then what was it, ma'am? It was nothing. Just something mild. Harmless. Her words tumbled out like marbles. It would have upset the stomach, that's all. A day, maybe two. No long-term harm. Ryan stood slowly, his voice quiet but sharp. You tried to drug us so we'd miss the cruise. Mom's face contorted. You don't understand. Paige needed this trip. She deserved it. And Julia, she turned to me, her voice dripping accusation. You always think you're better. You think because you make money you can say no. But family doesn't say no. I stared at her. My mother. The woman who taught me to tie my shoes, who pressed ice packs to my scraped knees, who braided my hair before picture day. She was looking at me now like I was the villain for refusing to bankroll my sister. The officers didn't argue. They only said, you'll need to remain available for follow-up. Do not leave town. But we have a cruise. Paige's voice cracked like glass. You won't be going, the officer said flatly. And just like that, the air went cold. When they left, the house was silent. Mom clutched her purse like a lifeline. Paige glared at me with eyes that could have cut glass. Dad kept staring at the wall. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The truth was out now, and nothing could shove it back into the dark. That night I barely slept. My heart wouldn't slow down, my mind wouldn't stop replaying it. Zoe's whisper, the police bagging the cake, my mother confessing. What chilled me wasn't the scheme itself, but the calculation behind it. They hadn't planned to kill me, just sideline me. To strip me from the picture long enough for Paige to take my place. As if my presence was optional. Disposable. In the morning we packed our bags anyway. Ryan folded clothes with robotic precision. Zoe hummed as she wheeled her little suitcase, determined not to let last night ruin her excitement. Me. I moved through the motions like a ghost. We left the house quietly without looking back. No dramatic confrontation, no shouting match, just absence. Mom and Paige weren't coming. The police had seen to that. And for the first time in my life, they couldn't guilt me into fixing anything. The ship was enormous when we boarded, gleaming like a floating city. But even as other families cheered and posed for pictures, I felt hollow. I'd imagined this trip differently. Chance to relax, to bond, to breathe. Instead, I carried the weight of betrayal heavier than any suitcase. It didn't take long for rumors to spread. On the very first night, my cousin Rachel cornered me in the hallway. Hey, where are your parents? Weren't they supposed to be here? Before I could answer, Zoe piped up cheerfully. They tried to poison us. Rachel blinked. I'm sorry, what? It's true, Zoe said matter-of-factly. They put stuff in the cake so we'd be too sick to go. I called the cops. And then she walked away like she'd just mentioned the weather. Rachel turned to me, waiting for me to laugh, to brush it off. I didn't. I just said, she's not exaggerating, and left her standing there, mouth open. By breakfast the next day, whispers had already begun. I caught them in the buffet line. My aunt murmuring to her husband, my uncle shaking his head. If it's true, I overheard, Paige has been freeloading for years. By day 3, it wasn't whispers anymore. Someone asked me directly if the cake had tasted strange. I answered honestly. I didn't eat it. Because Zoe told me not to. Zoe grinned. You're welcome. And that was that. The story grew legs and ran through every cabin, every dinner table, every family gathering spot on the ship. First I felt exposed raw. Like everyone was dissecting my private hell. But slowly something shifted. For once, I wasn't the silent provider. I wasn't the one covering, excusing, smoothing over. I was just telling the truth. And the truth had its own kind of power. Still, in the quiet of our cabin at night, I replayed it over and over. What if I hadn't listened to Zoe? What if I'd taken just one bite to please my mother? I pictured myself doubled over in a bathroom, the ship leaving without me, my money wasted, my absence explained away with some cheerful excuse. They would have let it happen. My own family. Not because they hated me, but because they didn't care. There's a kind of grief in realizing that. Hollowing out. I stared at the ceiling of the tiny cabin while the ship swayed, and I thought, I don't have a mother anymore. At least, not one who sees me as a daughter. When the cruise ended, we came home to silence. No messages, no apologies. Just absence. The kind of absence that felt intentional. And then came the email. Police report. Official, sterile, undeniable. They'd tested the frosting. It contained a laxative compound, strong enough to incapacitate, not kill. Enough to keep us in bed. Too sick to travel. Enough to prove Zoe right. I stared at the PDF until my vision blurred. Then I uploaded it to Facebook. No caption, no explanation. Just the report, highlighted text and all. Ryan asked, "Are you sure you want to?" He nodded. They posted their version first. This is mine. The comments came fast. Stunned friends, confused relatives, co-workers who didn't know what to say. No one defended Mom. No one excused Paige. 2 days later, Paige texted me a single thumbs down emoji. That was it. No apology. No denial. Just contempt. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't giving her anything. Not even words. That night my banking app pinged. The scheduled transfer to Paige's mortgage fund was due. 4 years, I'd sent her money on the first Friday of every month. Quiet, automatic, expected. My finger hovered. Then I deleted the rule. No warning, no explanation. Just silence. And that silence was the sweetest revenge I'd ever tasted.